Hello, my name is George, and today I will talk to you about Chapter 5, the Chicago. The table of contents for this presentation is as follows. After an introduction of what the Chicago School is, I will present an extract from the book The City, written by Robert Ezra Park, with its following subtitles. The natural history of the newspaper, what is a newspaper, the party papers, the independent press, and the yellow press. At the end, I will show you a visual model based on the contents of the chapter to make everything more understandable. First of all, the introduction. In 1892, the University of Chicago opens the Sociology Department, the first of its kind in the United States. Its work has been continuous ever since, but its golden years were in the 1920s, when the academic work coming from the department was highly regarded. The members of the Chicago School deviated from the traditional way of doing research and focused mostly on the relationship between communication and society. Their main areas of interest were immigrant groups, races, and interracial relations and labor. To analyze these groups and understand them from a sociological perspective, Chicago School emphasized on communication. As one of the members of the Chicago School says, communication technologies, processes, and institutions are considered fundamental to modern society. Robert Ezra Park is considered to be one of the founding members of the Chicago School. As an author, he produced some of journalism's classic texts, most of which are still relevant today, almost 100 years after they have been written. Apart from his academic work, Park spent most of his career in the University of Chicago, helping other academics with their work and research, and therefore has been a massive influence for generations of academics from the Chicago School. Chapter 5 of the textbook revolves around one of the introductory chapters of Robert Park's book, The City. This book, published in 1925, is considered to be one of Park's most influential works. The textbook chapter relies on a segment from the introduction of the book called Advertising and Social Control. In this chapter, Park addresses some questions that will serve as the framework for the rest of the book. These questions are: what is news? What are the methods and motives of the newspaperman? Are they those of an artist, a historian, or merely those of a merchant? To what extent does a newspaper control, and to what extent is it controlled by the public sentiment? What is a fake and why? What is yellow journalism and why is it yellow? What would be the effect of making the newspaper a municipal monopoly? What is the difference between advertising and news? The textbook then presents the rest of the introduction, which relates to the natural history of the newspaper. Rather than focusing on theory, this chapter lays the groundwork for the rest of the book, where the theory is explained. Here, Park tells the story of the newspaper from different perspectives, how it shaped and evolved over time. One important factor is the relationship between mass media and urban environment. When Park published this book, the newspaper was the mainstream form of communication, since the radio was still in its early phases and television was not yet invented, especially for a mass scale. Another paradigm is drawing the parallel between cities and the press. Park describes both as irrational, historic processes in which many individuals participated without having a clear idea of what the end result will be. Another important idea launched by Park in this chapter is that the power of a newspaper can be measured by its audience and circulation. He argues that a paper which is not read by people cannot be influential. Furthermore, Park says that to increase the readership, the press can make its content easier to understand even for people with low literacy skills. This characteristic of the newspaper can still be seen in today's newspapers. The second part is titled What is a Newspaper? And the newspaper has been described to be one of the following, according to different views by different stakeholders. First of all, the newspaper is described to be a tribune of the people. This aims at showing the link that the newspaper will tell stories that interest the people, and therefore the newspaper will show what the people are interested in. It is also described to be the great sophist for its ability to present ideas, thoughts, and opinions of the community. Furthermore, the newspaper has been described as a business enterprise. The purpose of the newspaper as a product is to create a profit for the owner. It is therefore important the newspapers get a good circulations and are bought by as many people as possible. Otherwise, it will not be profitable. The profits are the owner's only incentive for running the newspaper, and if the paper doesn't make money, then the owner will stop producing the newspaper. Another way to describe a newspaper is by describing it as a medium for creating advertising values. From the perspective of other businesses, the newspaper represents a good platform to advertise and show the products and services to as many people as possible. The wider the circulation of the newspaper, the more people will see the advertisement, and as a result, more customers might appear. In the end, Upton Sinclair, a moralist and socialist writer, describes the newspaper as a symbol of prostitution. He argues this by presenting ideas of how the newspaper will promote any advertisement for money, as well as how it would spin its stories and contents just for the single purpose of creating circulation and becoming more and more profitable. In the following part, titled The Party Papers, Park describes the press as party organs. He does this because of the influence newspapers have over the public and how they can be used by political parties to influence politics. When the newspaper plays a political role, the editor becomes more than just a recorder of events. He becomes a voice for politics. Furthermore, because of their role in the political agenda, newspapers started adding spins to their stories to fit with said agenda. Furthermore, the political scope would guide gatekeeping whether a story gets published or not. At this point, Park inquires about the notion of the liberty of the press, which would be diminished by the power of the political party. However, Park reaches the conclusion that the liberty of the press is liberty about expressing opinions rather than liberty about expressing facts. With the increasing power of the political parties, newspapers started downsizing and becoming a part of the party organization. This way, the party would have total control over the news released. When this happened, the editor is no longer a free agent, as party morale becomes more important than the determination on which the party exists. The independent press started as a revolt to the political machine. The New York Times was one of the first prominent actors in this process. With independent newspapers, party loyalty was no longer a virtue, and in time, independent newspapers became the accepted type of journalism because of the different style and form they had. This style and form involved shorter paragraphs and more stories than the traditional newspaper, and this made it more acceptable for the public. The yellow press constitutes a shift from traditional newspapers to modern ones. The biggest notable change is the disparity between provincial newspapers, which are highly focused on weddings, deaths, or lodge meetings, and the metropolitan newspapers focused on city life, crime, and the high society. In his theory of news and newspapers, Park argues that this shift occurs because of the different needs of the different groups. When he applied this theory to immigrant groups in Chicago, Park found out that immigrants in the city had more needs to interact with the society around them and to assimilate American culture, while most of the immigrants from the rural areas, who were a result of earlier migration, didn't need to assimilate culture as they lived in a much smaller community, uninfluenced by these major events. A characteristic of the yellow press is making literature out of news. Rather than telling facts, the newspapers tell stories. Some of these stories would be love and romance for women and sports and politics for men. This turned the newspaper from a source of factual information into a form of entertainment designed to attract more and more readers every day. This is also how the Sunday newspaper emerged, a paper that was designed by men to be bought by men for their wives, which was targeted at the shopping patterns of women, as women would often read the Sunday newspaper before going shopping. In the next part, we will discuss a visual model aimed at making this information more clear. This graph shows the difference between provincial newspapers and metropolitan newspapers. On the left side, it can be seen that provincial newspapers focus on general announcements, small events, and gossip stories. The shape and style of the provincial newspaper includes very long paragraphs, articles that are focused on being informational, and in provincial newspapers, the editor acts as a recorder of news. On the other hand, the metropolitan newspaper is focused on high society, crime and noise, and city life. The formal style used to describe these events is different, as paragraphs tend to be as short as possible for the purpose of maintaining reader attention and fitting as many stories as possible in one newspaper. Furthermore, the metropolitan newspaper's writing style creates literature out of news rather than being informational, as its purpose is to be a source of entertainment rather than a source of fact. The fourth and final part of this presentation is in conclusion. In the book The City, Robert Ezra Park argues that the history of the newspaper is built around a series of transformations. This type of work is what granted Park the title of father figure of journalism studies. This book is a testament of how Park and the Chicago School shifted away from the traditional stimulus-response model by drawing attention to the cultural context in which people create and consume media. Thank you for watching this presentation.